thought Dean Martin's drunk act was just an act. It was the perfect disguise. The teetering walk, the slurred speech, the glass of scotch that was usually just apple juice, a recipe he'd perfected since 1952. It allowed him to be the court jester, the harmless fool who could say anything and get away with it. But there was one night, deep in the neon-soaked winter of 1964, December 8th to be exact, the same night the FBI announced it had broken the KKK-affiliated Silver Dollar Group in Mississippi, when the glass in his hand wasn't a prop. It was a weapon. It was a line in the sand. The Sands Hotel and Casino was the center of the universe. If you were there, you mattered. And on this particular Tuesday night, the air in the Copa room was thick with Chesterfield smoke, Chanel No. 5, and the heavy electricity of power. The room was packed with 847 high rollers, mob associates, politicians, and tourists hoping to catch a glimpse of the magic. Hidden motive and missed detail. The show was being quietly observed by a CBS producer scouting for Dean's upcoming TV special. Every gesture was under a microscope. Furthermore, seated just 5 tables from the stage was Morris Mo Green, a West Coast associate whose name would later be borrowed for a famous cinematic gangster. He wasn't there for the music. He was there to watch Dean's crowd control. Dean was on stage, effortless as always. He was midway through That's Amore, toying with the crowd, pretending to forget the lyrics, making the ladies swoon and the men laugh. The world was right. The world was fun. But in the shadows of the floor, moving between the tables like a ghost, was Elena. Elena wasn't a star. She wasn't a high roller. She was 23 years old, invisible, and tired. Her feet were bleeding inside her $6.99 pumps from Woolworth's, but she kept smiling because she had to. Back home, in a cramped apartment on the wrong side of Vegas, her 2-year-old son, Michael, was sleeping under the watch of a neighbor she could barely afford to pay. Missed detail. Her shift started at 4 p.m. It was now 1:17 a.m. She had been standing for over 9 hours and had $4.30 in tips to show for it. She was assigned to Table 4, the whale table. Sitting there was a man we'll call Mr. Sterling. He was new money, loud, aggressive oil money from the Permian Basin that thought it could buy class by the barrel. He was surrounded by sycophants. Sterling had been drinking since noon, and his mood had shifted from boisterous to cruel. Psychological analysis. This was a man for whom wealth was a battering ram against a deep-seated insecurity. His performative cruelty was a demand for validation, a test to see who would dare challenge his bought and paid for reality. Alternate perspective. His chief sycophant, a man named Reynolds, watched the unfolding drama with a knot in his stomach. He'd seen this before in Houston. It never ended well for the help. But here, in this room, he felt a strange, hopeful dread. Maybe the rules were different. "Hey, sweetheart," Sterling bellowed, his voice cutting through the ambient noise. "My glass is empty. You blind or just stupid?" Elena rushed over, her head bowed. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll get you another right away." "Don't tell me you're sorry," Sterling sneered, grabbing her wrist with enough force to leave a faint bracelet of red. The table went quiet. "Tell me why I shouldn't have you fired right now." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She saw her rent money evaporating. She saw her son's milk disappearing. On stage, the music was still playing. The band was swinging. Dean was joking with Ken Lane at the piano. But Dean Martin had a gift that few people knew about. He had the eyes of a hawk. Underneath the heavy eyelids and the relaxed demeanor, he saw everything. He saw the shift in the room's energy. He saw the fear in the girl's shoulders. He kept singing, but his smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. Hidden motive. Dean was also painfully aware of the CBS man in the back. He knew a public confrontation could kill the deal. For a split second, he weighed his career against the girl's dignity. The calculation took less than a heartbeat. Elena returned with the drink, a double scotch neat. Her hands were shaking. As she leaned in, Sterling moved. It was subtle, just a jerk of his elbow, but it was intentional. Crash! The sound was like a gunshot in the intimate room. Amber liquid splashed all over Sterling's custom-made $800 Italian silk suit. Ice cubes skittered across the floor like diamonds. The music didn't stop, but the audience did. Heads turned. Sterling stood up, his face turning a violent shade of purple. "You clumsy little idiot. Do you know how much this suit costs? It costs more than you'll ever make in a lifetime." Elena was on her knees instantly, frantically trying to clean the mess with a napkin, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, sir. It slipped." Sterling kicked the napkin from her hand. It wasn't a hard kick, but the disrespect was violent. "Manager? Where is the manager? I want this incompetent trash out of here now." The floor manager, a nervous man named Harold, came running. He began a symphony of apologies to Sterling, looking at Elena with that look, the look that said, "You're done. You and your son are done." And that is when the music died. It wasn't a gradual fade out. It stopped abruptly. Dean Martin had turned to the band, his eyes like flint, and made a cutting motion across his throat. Cut it. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. 800 people held their breath. Dean Martin stood at the center of the stage. The cigarette in his hand burned a long, forgotten trail of ash. He wasn't swaying anymore. He wasn't slurring. The Dino character had vanished. In his place stood Dino Crocetti from Steubenville, Ohio, a man who'd worked in steel mills for $1.25 an hour, a man who dealt blackjack in illegal backrooms run by the Cleveland mob, a man who knew the smell of fear and the taste of other people's contempt. He placed his microphone on the piano. Thump. The sound echoed. He walked to the edge of the stage. He didn't take the stairs. He hopped down, landing softly on the carpeted floor with the grace of the welterweight boxer he'd once trained to be. He was 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, and in that moment, he looked 10 feet tall. He walked through the tables. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. He didn't look at the fans. He didn't look at the mob bosses in the front row. He walked straight to table 4. Sterling was still fuming, wiping his jacket with a cloth. But when he saw Dean Martin approaching, he straightened up. He expected a joke. He expected the king of cool to diffuse the situation with a laugh, maybe buy him a drink, maybe mock the waitress to make the rich guy feel better. That's what entertainers did. They kept the whales happy. Sterling forced a grin. "Dino, look at this mess, huh? Can you believe the help these days? Good thing you're here to save the night." Dean didn't smile. He didn't stop walking until he was inches from Sterling's face. Dean smelled of cologne and peppermint. He looked down at the waitress, who was still on her knees, a silent, shaking statue of shame. Dean reached down. His hand, manicured and adorned with a simple gold pinky ring, was gentle. He took Elena's arm and lifted her up. "Stand up, sweetheart," Dean said. His voice wasn't the booming baritone of the stage. It was soft, almost paternal. Elena looked up at him, her mascara running in black trails, utterly terrified. "Mr. Martin, Dean hushed her. He took the dirty napkin from her hand and tossed it on the wet tablecloth. Then he turned to Sterling. Sterling's grin faltered. "Now hold on, Dean. I ruined my suit. I'm a paying customer. I spend 50 grand a weekend in this joint." Dean looked at the suit. Then he looked Sterling in the eye. The air was so tense, you could hear the ice melting in abandoned glasses. "You know," Dean said, his voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, but calm, conversational. "I've spilled more booze on my tuxedos than you've ever drank. It dries, it cleans. But being a bully, that stain doesn't come out. It seeps right into your soul, pal." Sterling bristled. His ego was bruising in front of his peers. "Excuse me? Do you know who I am? I could buy and sell this hotel." Dean took a step closer. This was the dangerous Dean, the Dean who knew guys who solved problems in the desert. "You can buy the hotel," Dean said, his voice dropping a register. "But you can't buy class, and you certainly can't buy the right to treat a lady like dirt in my room." "Your room?" Sterling laughed nervously, looking around for support that wasn't coming. "I pay your salary, singer." That was the mistake. Dean didn't hit him. He didn't need to. He leaned in close, closing the distance until their noses almost touched. The entire showroom was leaning forward. What was he saying? Was he going to punch him? What if scenario? What if Dean had thrown a punch? The CBS deal vanishes. The Sands owners are furious. The story becomes a tabloid brawl, not a legend. The magic is lost in the mess. The Rat Pack's invincible aura cracks. But Dean was smarter than that. Dean whispered something. It was 5 seconds of whispering.
Sterling's face went pale. The arrogance drained out of him like water from a cracked glass. His eyes darted to the side, looking for an exit, landing on a figure at the far end of the bar. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing like a cork. Dean pulled back, straightened his tuxedo jacket, and winked at Elena. "Get your things," Dean said to Sterling, his voice returning to normal volume, "and get out." "You can't kick me out," Sterling stammered, but he was already backing away, bumping into his own chair. Dean looked at the floor manager, Harold, who was trembling. "He's leaving. Check is on the house, but if he ever sets foot in the Sands again while I'm breathing, I walk, and Frank walks, and Sammy walks." That was the nuclear option. The Sands without the Rat Pack was just a building in the desert. Harold knew it. The owners knew it. Mo Green in the front row nodded, almost imperceptibly, in approval. "Security," Harold called out, finding his courage. 2 large men appeared and escorted a stunned, silent Sterling out of the showroom. The whale had been beached. The room was silent for 1 more second. Then, it didn't just applaud, it erupted. It wasn't the polite applause for a song, it was the roar of respect, a cathartic release of collective conscience. But Dean wasn't done. He turned to Elena, who was still shaking, clutching her tray against her chest like a shield. "What's your name, honey?" "Elena," she whispered. Dean reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a wallet. He pulled out a clip of cash, a thick roll of $100 bills, his just-in-case money, often as much as $10,000. He didn't count it. He took the entire roll and pressed it into Elena's hand, folding her fingers over it. "Buy a new dress and something nice for your kid. I know you got one. You got that mama bear look in your eyes." Elena looked at the money. It was thousands of dollars, more than she made in a year. "Mr. Martin, I can't." "You can," Dean said, flashing that $1 million smile, the one that made the world feel okay again. "Consider it a tip for dealing with the garbage, and a little seed money. You're better than this room." He turned to Harold. "She goes home now, paid for the night, and one of your guys drives her. You got that, Hal?" Harold nodded vigorously. Dean hopped back onto the stage. He picked up his drink, the apple juice, raised it to the ceiling and said, "Now where were we?" He snapped his fingers. "Ah, yes, when the moon hits your eye." The band kicked in, and the show went on as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Elena was sent home in a hotel limousine, not as punishment, but with a personal escort from security. She sat in the back, clutching the money, her whole body trembling not from fear, but from a profound, life-altering grace. Elena never waited tables again. She used the money for night classes, becoming a licensed practical nurse by 1967. She worked at Sunrise Hospital for 30 years. Her son, Michael, inspired by the kindness of the man she called the angel in the tux, became a pediatrician. In 1987, he treated a young boy with leukemia for free because the family reminded him of his mother's story. The kindness rippled outward in ways Dean could never have imagined. Elena sent Dean a Christmas card every year until his death in 1995. She never knew if he got them, but she had to try. But for 50 years, The mystery remained. What did Dean whisper? The legend grew with every retelling. Some said Dean threatened to call Sam Giancana himself. Some said he simply said, "I know what you did in Galveston," referencing a dark rumor. Elena kept the secret. She honored the man who saved her dignity. But in 2014, on her deathbed, surrounded by her son and grandchildren, she finally told the truth. Dean hadn't threatened violence or the mob. He had looked the predator in the eye and said, "I saw you looking at her before the spill. You bumped her arm on purpose. If you don't walk out of here right now, I'm going to take this microphone and tell every person in this room, including your wife back in Texas, she's sitting at the bar in the green dress, isn't she? Exactly what you were trying to do. How you create a crisis to force a dependency. I know the game. Now get out before I name it." Sterling's wife had indeed slipped into the room unannounced, hoping to surprise him. Dean's hawk eyes had caught that too. He didn't just defend Elena, he outmaneuvered Sterling with cold, devastating precision. Modern parallel. It's the viral video of a celebrity shutting down a harasser on a plane. It's the manager who hears a sexist joke in a boardroom and says, "Explain why that's funny." It's the Me Too moment that happened in whispers for decades before it had a name. The dynamics are unchanged, only the stage and the recording device are different. Dean Martin conducted a masterclass in public accountability long before it was a hashtag. Psychological analysis, postscript. Why did the room erupt? Because they were complicit. They'd all seen it. They'd all looked away, choosing their night's entertainment over a stranger's suffering. Dean's act absolved them of their collective sin. He did what every one of them, in their secret heart, wished they had the power to do. He wasn't just saving Elena, he was saving their idea of themselves. Dean Martin played the drunk, but he was the most sober man in the room. And in a city built on illusions, his kindness was the only real thing that lasted. Life lesson. Cool isn't an aesthetic. It's a moral position. It's the clarity to see the truth in a fog of pretense and the courage to act on it when the cost is high. True power isn't in making others kneel. It's in knowing when to tell them to stand up. The loudest statement is sometimes a whisper. The strongest stand is taken not with fists, but with unshakable truth and the willingness to burn your own bridges to protect someone else's path. Elena's son, Dr. Michael Ross, still visits the spot where the sands once stood, now a vacant lot between glittering mega-resorts. He says that sometimes, if you listen closely, through the digital noise of the modern Las Vegas Strip, you can still hear it. Not the music, not the applause, but the sound of a glass being put down, a prop set aside, and a man standing up, utterly sober, for what's right. A moment of pure, unscripted humanity that outshone all the sequins and neon. Is there a moment in your life where you wish someone had stepped in? Or a moment where you stepped in for someone, however small the gesture? Las Vegas has many secrets, but this was its most beautiful one. A story not of vice, but of virtue disguised in a tuxedo. If you want to know the real stories, the ones they didn't put in the magazines, you're in the right place. We are peeling back the curtain on the legends. Don't forget to subscribe to Dean Martin, The Untold Legacy. We're just getting started. Next week, we dive into the night Frank Sinatra faced down the board of the Cow Neva to protect a friend, and the tragic loss that eventually silenced the music for good. Leave a comment below. What's your favorite Dean Martin song? And did you know he had a heart this big? I'll see you in the next video. Keep swinging, pals.